The president and vice president have both called and congratulated President-elect Donald Trump on his win. It's being described as a political comeback after refusing to admit defeat in 2020. To talk more about the outcome, Suzanne Chad, political science professor from North Central College, joins us. Hello, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm fine, Micah. How are you?
Good. Historic election cycle in so many ways. Historic last night. And we're not going to get into a lot of that, but let's get into how we got to this point. When Kamala Harris got into the race in July, it started with a lot of enthusiasm, money pouring in, things like that. But obviously, it wasn't enough for her to win this race. Where did she go wrong? Some believe that maybe she took a while to differentiate herself from the president.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the postmortem happens fast as it should to see why didn't the election maybe turn out the way that was expected, the way, of course, Harris wanted, her supporters wanted, maybe the party expected. And so I think there's a couple of things to acknowledge. The first of which is, where there may have been some potential missteps in the part of her campaign. And I think it's important to note, as you said, she was the candidate only since July for, a little over 100 days and had to inherit the headwinds of President Biden, who was not particularly popular, and figure out how to distance herself from him in things that weren't particularly popular while trying to double down on things that were, and have a very short amount of time to do it. And so for any candidate, that would be particularly challenging. But I think it's important to recognize the uphill battle that she has because of her identities, that no matter how hard she worked or tried to separate herself, tell us who she was, be detailed in her policies, because she is a woman of color at the top of that ticket. It is going to be more challenging for people to trust her and hear her for who she is and that she's a qualified candidate, regardless of any potential missteps in her campaign.
If she had had more time, do you think that would have made a difference?
One of the things we know for women when they run for office, and particularly women with other minoritized identities, that writing their narrative before the media cycle writes it or before society writes it is really challenging, to play against tropes and stereotypes. And with more time, you can push against it a little bit. And so maybe it would have helped a bit, but it's just a challenge regardless of whether you have a year and a half or 100 days.
So Donald Trump has beaten two women for the presidency. I guess the question I asked last night to a lot of the folks who were here, what is his secret sauce?
Yeah, I think it's both what he does to run, which is to play upon fear, anger, and anxiety about people who weren't built in the system with power, getting power. So women, we talk about hostile sexism, that women are going to take over and they're going to engage in revenge against men and take over the power. He is good at tapping into that sort of latent or more not so latent fear. And also for communities of color and immigrant communities that are coming in and taking over. He tapped into that was already in the electorate and ran with that. So when a person who inhibits or embodies those identities is running against that, whether it's Hillary Clinton as a woman, as a white woman, and then Kamala Harris as a woman of color, it's really hard to play against those messages.
But as we look at the numbers today, we see that he got a large majority of the male Latino vote and white women.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we think about, women aren't sexist, only men are sexist, which is not the case, because sexism and feelings of sexism and discrimination is also linked to ideology and party. And then the same thing for communities of color. We're thinking that they would want to vote for a candidate that is also a candidate of color. But the thing that we know is that we are deeply wedded in our party. We are calcified in it. And we've seen movement in the Latin community towards the Republican Party a little bit over time, and particularly Latin men, because of the connection to a very strong masculine leader. And so that we saw come to a head with these exit polls.
And regardless of what happened at the rally at Madison Square Garden and things like that, and the things that he has been saying negative about women throughout, and saying he wanted to take care of them and things like that. So going from here, where does the Democratic Party have to do? What do they have to do, and where do they have to go?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in classes all day, students asking this question. We talk about what we call the magic wand candidate, which is, we think about the perfect candidate, and who would that be? And for the Democratic Party, for voters, they may want different kinds of candidates, diverse candidates, but we don't think those candidates are electable. So we go with a standard bearer of American politics. We go for a white man. And that's part of how we got Joe Biden winning in 2020. And so I think the party has to decide, as we see how the next few years rolls out and the direction the Republican Party takes, how do we talk about electability? Who can win in the Democratic Party? Does it have to be the people that have always won, other than Barack Obama? Or can there be a shift from the top towards a person who really is that magic wand candidate?
And obviously, we will have to wait and see either through the midterms or in the next 4 years what happens with both parties.
That's exactly right.
Thank you,
That's exactly
Suzanne.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Micah.